Hi, it's Jen from Shabby Fabrics with a really fun project. This is another product from PlumEasy Patterns. I just love what they create. Quite some time back now, I can't believe it's been this long, I found the videos on how to make the folded star hot pad in both the round version was the first one that I did, and then we also did the square version. These are amazing. I use these, they're beautiful, and they're an amazing gift. Well, that talented group of people there at PlumEasy Patterns, Deborah Miller and her daughter Bethany, who are so clever, decided they wanted to create a new product, and it's called the Folded Star Stencil. And it's similar but different, and I love the versatility of this product. That's what this product looks like, and I can't wait to show you how to use that. And of course, they do such a good job with their instructions, being full color, and they even give us a project in the end. So you'll be able to make either a folded star hot pad, but it's a little bit different in that we have this really cool opening. It's not quite a folded star, but kind of. Or we could create a block and now set that into this free project is a pillow, maybe even a quilt or table runner. So more on that soon, but let me jump into how it's similar but different. So let's look at the folded star hot pad again. We start in the center and everything's folded from the very beginning and works its way out. There really isn't a center focal fabric, so to speak. With the folded star stencil, what that allows us to do is choose a center focal motif. Really, I fussy cut that, and then we start building stars around that. And we can vary the size of those basically prairie points to either get, as we see here on this side, a bigger vantage point to that blue center, or over on this side, I made my prairie points larger. And so now you see how you're seeing less of the center. That's the versatility of this. Plus, with the folded star hot pad, that makes an 8-inch every time. With our folded star stencil, we're able to make smaller things, almost like a mug rug. So awesome versatility. So let's just put this right up here, and let's dive into how do we decide what are our options? How do we know what's available to us? Of course, they're going to talk us through our stencil, which I'll get to in just a minute. But over here, right here, I want to draw your attention to the fabric and cutting guide. That's where you can decide right up front, what size do I want this either hot pad or potential quilt block to be? So right here is our star block size from 3.5 all the way up to 8. And then they give us what our prairie point size would be. This column that says prairie point size, and I'll fold that over so it's maybe a little easier for you to see that. Right here in this column, that's the size that you would cut your squares to. And you'll be cutting right here. Each block requires 8 prairie points, all of the same size in fabric. And to make magic corners, what we're shown here, that's what that measurement is here. So I jumped ahead just a little bit. So let's jump back into this. So let's just pretend we wanted to make a 6-inch, let's just say we're going to make a hot pad today. We would make sure we cut 8 4-inch squares, and from that, you would just cut a 4 by width of fabric strip. They let us know how we would start off cutting our fabric, and then of course you'll be cutting 8 4-inch squares and then folding them. The background, which is what this is right here, and the backing, and even the batting, we're going to be cutting a little bit bigger by 1 inch. So if you're going to make a 6-inch folded star hot pad in this instance, you're going to cut a 7-inch background. If you're going to do a 7, you're going to be 8. So this is what's telling you what size to cut here, your backing as well as your batting. And then the magic corners, they're calling it, it's kind of a cute name. That's these corners right here, and that's letting you know what size to cut those. So you can see in this one, I only did 1 background and 1 round of prairie points. In this one, I decided to do my background, but 2 sets of prairie points. So we'll repeat that today. I want to show you how to do that if you like 2 layers of prairie points. So we will make sure that we cut our background to 8 inches, that our prairie points are cut to 5 inches, and of course we're cutting a 5 by width of fabric strip to get that, and that our background, backing and even my batting, I cut to 9, and that our corners are cut to 3.5. As I said, I decided to do this extra layer of prairie points, and I just chose a 4-inch for that. So that way they're a little bit smaller and they kind of set back, because I like that double layering. Let's get the stencil out, let's get a background fabric out, and let's talk about how we use this stencil. So cool. I chose a really kind of plain background just so it's easier for you to see the markings that I'm going to mark here with the stencil. So let's bring that here and let's just look at this product real fast. So you see that there is the 4 corners here. Hopefully you can see that from above. And there's a slit in there. So I can just anchor this on here, and I'm just going to draw those 4 corners right now. And that's going to eventually be our cut line. That's kind of our boundary. That's our limit of what we're doing here. Now notice these lines, 3.5, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Depending on the size of the hot pad or just quilt block you're making, let's say it's going to be the 6-inch. You would be drawing your line here and up about 1 inch. I'm going to go ahead and make the biggest one that I can. I'm going to try to repeat this here. So I'm going to go all the way back to my 8. I'll draw the line here and up about 1 inch. And we will repeat that on all 8 of these sides. So let's take that off. This is what this looks like now. You're like, wow, how do I use that? So now it's time to make our prairie points that are going to be sitting. These are kind of horizons. They're almost like, think of them like a shelf. Our prairie points, I'm going to jump ahead here. Our prairie points, I've made one, but I'm going to show you 2 different approaches to making them. That little shelf is what is going to be our baseline for our prairie points. So that's why drawing those in, I'm using a friction pen for that, and they're going to be completely covered up. This is a disappearing pen, but even if you used a permanent marker, no worries. These will be completely covered up with our prairie point. But let's talk about some ways to make our prairie point. So one of the things that we know we want is this really sharp crease. Anytime I know I want my fabric to really remember that press, I add sizing and generously add sizing. So that's your first step. Go ahead and spray that really well. Iron out everything good and flat. And as we saw in our instructions for the 8-inch hot pad that we'll be making today, we'll be cutting the 5-inch squares. And then I just opted for that second row, and we'll be cutting those to 4 inches. And that's going to be my second fabric here. And that's, we started off with 4-inch squares. I can just show you what that looks like. But I want to show you how to get a really good crease and a really sharp point, which is going to have us have a really good looking, a really sharp point in the end. So your first approach, of course, is, by the way, cut your fabrics really precisely. I was a little sloppy on when I was cutting one of my very first Folded Star hot pads now a couple years ago, and I was like, it's close enough. It definitely threw the project off. Grab a fresh blade in the rotary cutter. If your rotary cutter is dull at all, get a fresh blade and the cuts will be so clean, and make sure you're right on the money at whatever size squares you're cutting. And once you have that done, we'll fold the fabric in half. This is your first approach to making these. By all means, if you want to use steam, go for that. You can just fold one side down at a time if you want. I have found it to be more accurate when I fold both at the same time, knowing that I'm trying to get that very sharp point, just like that. Now I have definitely I have to admit, I've made a lot of these. I have definitely burned my fingers a couple of times, and I think that's why the second approach is my favorite, and the results are even sharper than what I just did. And that's the Susan Cleveland Prairie Pointer here. It's an amazing tool. We just kind of put a string on the end just because this gets hot when you use it, and this way we don't have to touch that. We can just pull the string back when we're done using it. Inside there, it's just this amazing sizes. So if you enjoy making Prairie Points for really any project, incredible product to use, and it comes in really handy for both the Folded Star hot pad as well as the Folded Star Stencil, because basically you're making the same Prairie Points. So again, when we use this tool, we will just fold our fabric in half, but now we will bring our Prairie Pointer right in, and I want to get my head out of the way. See these lines on the Prairie Pointer? I'm just scooting that up here. And you see this line right here, right, that's drawn? What we do is we're just folding that. See how I have that visual target now? That center crease. And I just hold this on here. Now we all know that metal will conduct electricity and heat. So that's why it was actually Bethany Miller who said, you know what, she always tied on this kind of longer string. And that way, once this was done pressing, she could just pull that string back because this is quite hot at this point. So I think that these are just dynamite. I think they're even more precise than when I try to do it myself because I have that edge to turn over and I have that visual line that I'm shooting for. So I think this is worth its weight in gold. Ooh, that is warm. You put that over there. Okay. Once you make your Prairie Points, now it's time to use our drawn lines to lay everything out. This is where the glue comes in. Roxanne's Glue Based It. This is the stuff we were all, raised up on as quilters. Well, as time has passed, Roxanne's Glue Based It now has, I think it's called it's kind of a two-way applicator. You've got this on the one end, and the other end is a much larger amount that can come out for bigger projects. I don't find a whole lot of projects that I'm using in DIY where I use that end, but I use this one all the time. So when we get ready to lay our project out, the first thing that we want to do is actually grab something to put underneath our project. And this is a Fons & Porter applique pressing sheet. The reason we do that is the glue will definitely soak through our fabric and we don't want to get any glue on our workspace. You could use really anything. You could be using wax paper if you don't have an applique pressing sheet handy, just something to protect your work surface. Once you've done that, we're going to basically be using our lines, all 8 of those, to lay everything out. Now, I want to mention that once we lay those out and we're going to glue everything down, we'll be putting glue here and here on the first one only. That's because as we come around, all the way around this side, on the very last one, that last one is going to actually tuck under the first, and that's why we don't put glue on this side. On all the others, I'll show you what I'm talking about. On the first one only, I only put glue here and here. On the others, I'll put glue on all 3 spots. I'm just going to do a couple in advance. There's nothing wrong with putting that glue on multiples as long as you're going to work on the project right now and not get interrupted. So just be sure you know that you're going to be able to go. So with this first one, which is this one, notice there's no glue on this side. I'm going to lay this down and I'm looking at this line up here. You can either just kind of visually look at that, or I can use my Folded Star Stencil again. See this line back here? Right there. I'm going to actually move this so you see that. See that line? I can line up I can put my Prairie Point down. Let me move this out of the way. I like being really precisely aligned. So I have that here and that here. And notice this. Notice how my stencil is running right down that. That's exactly lined up. That's what we want. Now when we turn our project, and now we're looking at, here's our baseline. And I'm looking at this spot to make sure I've actually hit that. Maybe I'll move that tip, yep, just a touch. You know, I just like precision. It doesn't have to be absolutely dead on, but it needs to be pretty close. So for the next one, again, let me show you one more time. Okay, I like that. Now I'm going to keep going. We'll kind of speed it up. Once I get to this one, I'm going to come back with you in real time, and I want to again lift that flap up and show you how it's always this one that's over the right side, over the right side. We want to continue that, and if we don't lift up that flap on the last one, that won't happen. So I'll keep laying these out, and then I'll come right back to you for that very last one. Okay, so for this last one, I'm going to lift this up. See how that happens? Now everything is nicely layered. Let me double check our alignment. So cool. Now if you just want one layer, that's fantastic. And now you just be moving on to adding our corners. I want to add another layer on, and what makes this next layer actually simpler is I don't need to use the stencil to align myself anymore, because I'm lining up the baseline and I'm just lining up the folds of my Prairie Points. See that? So that I've got my kind of my shelf again, and now I'm just making sure that the smaller Prairie Point is the folds in line with the other one. And we will repeat that again. Glue here and here only for the first piece, go all the way around, and under that last one, we'll scoot that underneath here, and you're going to add that glue and lay that down. And then once that's done, we'll be adding what's called our magic corners. We'll again be referring to here, they're having us cut those to 3.5 inches, and they're very generous. They'll be overlapping. There'll be plenty for us to be able to trim up. So I'll glue these down, and then when I come back, let's go ahead and put those magic corners on, and then we'll move on with completing our hot pad. So we have all of our Prairie Points on, and that's when it's a really good time to go ahead and just give everything a really good press. You know, having that drawn line in the corner, if you accidentally iron that away, you can always draw that back. It's not super critical that it's there. It'll end up being covered up here pretty quickly, and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Now it's time to add our corners if you should choose to do so. In the pattern, they talk about the option of now at this point not adding those, and as I guess this would be an octagon, and you can now go complete that as either a block or as a hot pad. And of course now you'd be adding your batting and backing, be stitching your stars down, and basically finishing it up and have an octagon. I'm going to go ahead and go for a square today. So that's when we add our magic corners. So we're using our guide that I mentioned that'll let us know what size to cut those. And the first step that I found to be helpful is to just take our corners and give them a bit of a press, point to point. It just helps me very clearly see. I'm going to also draw a line right there, point to point. But I'll show you where they're going to be positioned. Let me get some pins here, we'll need that. Basically, we've got a raw edge here, and we know that we can't be having this butt up to it because you'd still have a raw edge. So you're going to place this a visual 1/4 inch above that. And notice how I have about the same amount of the point sticking out on this side as this side. Once you have that, you'll go ahead, just kind of hold that in position and open that up. And we're going to pin this. These are the longer, pin it out here. I'm going through a lot of bulk right now. And I'm going to put a pin out here just to keep that from shifting. These are the longer, this one here, these are the longer, they're the fine pins, and I'm finding more and more use. This is the fine pin and this is the extra fine. You can see they're quite different in length and they have different missions. So I'm going to go to the sewing machine now and I'm going to sew this corner to corner, and you'll just repeat that step for all 4 of your corners. And you remember how I said that that 3.5-inch square, really the magic corners on any size you do are generous. They're very generous. And you can see they're extending well beyond that ledge. Don't worry. This is all going to be trimmed up, and these sides, these are here, are really going to be our guide when we get ready to trim everything up. And I wanted to point out that they mention in this pattern, when I first did this, I'm like, I must have done something wrong. I was expecting those to basically kind of sit in that corner right there, just all nice and perfect. And they don't. And they purposely plan that so that you have plenty of room to square up. That's what they're trying to show right here. You see this right there? How there's this, that purple is representing the background, and then the yellow is representing, of course, our prairie points and our magic corner. See that right there? And this gap? That's what they're trying to let us know, is that this is the sight picture that we're probably going to see. Extending, it comes in extending. But we will be able to come back later and redraw our corners on if we want, and we're going to square everything up. So what I'm going to do right now is, again, go put on those other corners. I've creased them. I've drawn the line. Just a reminder, I'm placing that 1/4 of an inch visually above. If that bugs you, if it's not exactly 1/4, just lay a ruler down if you want to do that. And then you can line everything up with that. Once you're happy with that, again, let's pin that in place over here. I'm going to use a longer pin over on this side. And we'll go sew that line, and we'll repeat that for the 4 corners. So I'll do that. When I come back, I want to square this up with you, but I think we'll go back and redraw those corners so you have a little bit more of a visual lineup, so we're cutting this just as precisely as we can. So I have my 4 corners on, and that's what this looks like right now. And it's time to square up. One thing that I noticed when I got to this stage of making the sample here that I did here a couple days ago is I felt like I wanted to have those corners back. I wanted to have that line back. I could line up here with just the side, but I felt like it was a little too interpretive for me. So one thing, and I don't think this is in the pattern, is you can grab this back. The stencil has, I want to show you this. Let me use this piece of batting. These corners right here, right? And then there's that line, north, south, east, and west, basically, in those 4 corners. If you line up your stencil with that line here, 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 and here, get everything beautifully aligned, I can redraw those corners in, because that helps me have a little bit more of a lineup to now trim this unit up. Again, maybe it's the pilot in me. I like precision, and all my passioners love that about me too. But Even in quilting, it seems to come over. And I like everything to be just so, because we want this to have a really beautiful 90-degree corner and be as square as possible. So let's line this ruler up. Now I have this line plus those lines in the corner that help confirm I truly have the right position. I am as square as can be. Now, if you had a spinning mat, this is a great time to use that. I did not grab that on set with me, but that's okay. I am going to continue to square everything up. And you know, you can keep lining up with your cutting mat as another alignment option. And we are going through a lot of layers here. Again, another reason for a really sharp blade in that rotary cutter. You could do this with scissors. I don't think that's the right tool for the mission, just because I can't cut very super straight with scissors the way that I can with a rotary cutter. So again, why I think a fresh blade, and I'm using my 6.5 by 12.5 inch creative grid is just my go-to. When I need to kind of cut something down, I find myself, where is that ruler? Okay, once we have that, now we're at the place where we're going to grab our batting, and of course our backing will be right side down, and we're going to layer everything all together. And you know, I really could have waited to actually trim everything up until I had this on, but that's even more layers to cut through. We'll quilt everything and we'll go back and trim again. I like that I know I can see my batting, I can see my backing. I know that I will absolutely capture those when I'm doing my quilting. Now I'm just going to put a couple pins in here just so that nothing is moving. And the next thing we're going to be doing, let me go get a longer pin, is we're going to add our quilting. So let me just point out here what we're doing. You can see here, now a coordinating thread is important. We're going to see this thread. I chose to do stitch here as well as on this one. I even went a little bit further and came in on my background and I put a stitch here. You could do decorative stitching, free motion quilting in here, do whatever you want, maybe really accentuate whatever that center motif might be. That's where you can kind of just play around. So I'm going to kind of just pin this, and let's go over to that machine, and I'm going to I want you to see this, and I'm just going to start, maybe I'll just start on this layer. It's probably a little easier for you to see it. I would probably start on the inside, but I want you to be able to see what I'm doing. Is I'm just going to start, and I'm going to shorten my stitch length. It's going to be a little bit easier for me to control where that needle stops. And ideally, you want to stop right at that fold and change directions. And you want to try to keep that same distance. Maybe it's 1/8, maybe it's 3/16. Whatever that is, our goal is to try to keep that really the same. So let's go get started. By the way, I'm working with Perfect Union. It's a beautiful collection from Laundry Basket Quilts by Edita Sitar, and she designs for Andover Fabrics. I love this collection. Super popular designer and a wonderful person too. All right, so I'm just going to find that distance, and I think I'm on a 97D right now. I just kind of see on the inside of this foot is kind of where I'm looking. That's going to be my visual distance between my fold and that side of that presser foot. That is fantastic. I love that. I did 2 rounds of that. And again, you know, with the center being kind of so plain, I would go do something in the middle there. Now, go ahead and give everything a good press. One thing I wanted to mention is sometimes, depending on how big of the opening, You could make this really small Prairie Points and have a big opening. You might even want to use a basting spray so you don't get kind of a bubble in the middle here. And that's why I think I would definitely add in some quilting just to kind of get everything down and add some interest, of course. Now, before we trim everything up, you might want to put kind of a stay stitch, maybe just kind of a basting stitch, because our next step will actually be binding. Again, I don't think this is in the pattern. It's kind of just something that feels right. So that I just kind of, you've got all these flaps. We just want everything to be held together when we're putting our binding on. So I'm going to go ahead and I am going to put maybe just an 1/8 inch, kind of just stitch everything down, and then we're going to trim this up and move on to binding. Okay, now that everything is just really, really secure, I'm going to go now and just retrim everything. And I am glad that I was tempted to not really trim anything up until the quilting was done, and I'd be going now through batting and the backing. I think with a sharp enough blade and maybe even a 60 millimeter, it wouldn't have a problem, but it's definitely a lot more to go through. So we are so close to getting our binding done. So while I'm trimming this up, the pattern talks about a 2 1/4 inch binding strip. And if you're going to be stitching this down to the background by hand, then that's not a problem. I like to use my hot pads really hard. And so I am going to be stitching this down and securing this to the back. Okay, so once we have our hot pad, or maybe, by the way, I should have mentioned to you, if you're not going to be putting this into making a hot pad and you want to just have a quilt block, maybe to go into a table runner, a quilt, however you pillow, that's the free project in there. You just wouldn't put the batting and backing. You would still quilt your star, just skip that batting and backing, as I said. Okay, so we're here now and we need to bind that. As I said when I was trimming that up, 2 1/4 seems a little narrow because I am going to be securing this by machine. So I have my strip and I've just folded that in half as we would with any binding strip. But there's one extra step that we'll do because of the technique that I'll show you. If you've got your favorite technique, you can skip over this and just bind your hot pad and decide if you want to have a hanging loop, which I'll talk about as well in just a moment. But if you're going to go ahead, if you want to know what binding technique I recommend, this is what I did. I just fold this down 90 degrees. I've, of course, done this first crease. Press that in half and give a good press. Once we've had that crease, I'll just open that back up and I'll trim 1/4 inch away, a healthy 1/4 inch, maybe even just a little bit more than that, because that's going to be the edge. I'll show you what I mean. Move that out of the way. We'll fold this back down. The tail of our binding, once we come all the way around all 4 sides of the hot pad and come back to where we started, that little cove there is where the tail of our binding is going to fit in. Now I have plenty of room here that I could cut at this point. Go ahead and cut my hanging strip. You could do that now or after you attach the binding, however you want to do it. You could cut just even just a 6 inches, probably plenty. In fact, I did one in advance. Let me see, how long did we do? I guess we did do 6 inches. Okay, plenty of room. If you're going to do a hanging tab, as these have on the back for display, so you can hang that up, this is the time to do that. You could attach that. But you know, if you're like, I'm never going to hang this thing up, skip this step altogether. It's another thing you don't even need to worry about. But if you do want to do that, you'll just take your fabric, and I think this is pretty chunky. I would trim this down to something much narrower. Let's trim that to about here. And we can fold. We have that nice crease in the middle. You'll fold toward the middle on both sides, just like that. And then fold in half again and stitch on either side. That's the easiest way to make a hanging loop, really, for any project you're working on. And then just fold that in half again, just like that. And I think it looks really nice when you top stitch actually on both sides. Once that's done, if you bring the two edges together like this, let me show you on, let me move this so you're seeing I have a good vantage point of kind of the best way I think to do this is when you bring the two edges together, you just kind of create this little kind of fumbling around with that today, it looks like. It's like you almost just kind of press it on itself and kind of make this point. See that? That seems to work really well for a hanger. It looks really nice. And give that a really good press. Just like that. Pick your whatever place you want, you know, your favorite side, let's say it's that. See that slit right there? On the back side, I'm going to look up above. See, I can see that slit, and the two sides of mine are just on the opposite sides of that, just like that. I'm just going to clip that. Actually, I think I'll clip that. I don't want that to move. And let's just go do a quick basting stitch. Let me double check I didn't move. I can see that slit and that slit are opposite. It's a little bit easier to put the hanging tab on now than when you attach your binding before you roll it to the back, because you can see that slit a little bit easier. And we're just going to do shorten my stitch length and just do a short 1/8 inch basting stitch, back stitch a couple times. Okay, here we are now binding. So I mentioned that this is going to be where the end kind of tucks in. That's why you never want to have a binding strip start in the corner. Go ahead and put that somewhere, maybe about in there. And let's clip that. We will start stitching 1/4 inch right here, and you'll stop so that you don't want to secure this flap. You need to leave that open. So you'll come here, 1/4 inch, stop before here, and then let's pick that up right about in here. I want to have a nice healthy gap. So when we come around with the tail, we have plenty of space for that tail to poke in there. So that as we're using this hot pad and washing that, it never comes unseated. Once you get to this corner, a 1/4 inch away from the corner, let me mark that. We're going to stop. You'll see me stop and backstitch, probably right about in there. I'm going to actually cut my thread there. What will happen then is we'll roll that back, just like that, and then we'll turn this, move this out of the way, and then we'll come back down this side. 1/4 inch, and you start right off the edge, 1/4 inch all the way, stop, 1/4 inch again from the end. And it's hard to pre-mark that, right? You kind of just have to know where that place is. Kind of just peek around. I can see maybe just after here. And then come back, and we'll do that for all of those corners. And when I come around, we're going to tuck that flap in, but I want you to see that part. So let's back stitch. Might even move that out of the way a little bit here. And let's stop. Let's cut that. Now we're going to jump ahead to right about, I'm going to start even a little bit later, maybe right about here. Let's backstitch again. To that spot, that's about a 1/4 inch. I'm going to get ready and slow down. Let's backstitch there. And let's cut our thread. This is the part I want you to see. I turn the project so that it's the direction I'll be traveling in. But you see how I lay that back? And you're looking for basically that 90-degree corner right there. So that's a 45. Now I turn that so that it's the direction I'm traveling in. I want to be nice and even. Some people even press this. If that's you, go for it. And I come right off the end. And again, a 1/4 inch. And I'm looking. I can see probably right after this stripe, I'll stop. Maybe right at that stripe, actually. Let's cut that. And again, laying that back at that 45. You can finger crease it if you want to. Now, putting that right in that corner. Clip that. All right, and we'll continue, and I'll do the same thing in these corners, and then I'm going to come, when I come back, we're going to be coming right down here. I want to show you how to do that tuck. So this is our final row, and you can see this is plenty, right? I'm not going to trim yet, but I'm getting close. You know, I can see that's where my stitching is, so I just grab those scissors. I could probably trim a little bit more. The goal here is just to tuck under, just like that, just like that. And let's go ahead and secure that. Okay. Now, some people choose to whip stitch this close right here. I think because we had such a healthy tuck under I really don't think that that's ever going to come undone, because remember, this is going to be rolled to the back and stitched down from the front. I just don't think that's ever going to come out. So it's probably not an actual necessary step. But let's go back to the front. I want to show you how I clip the project and get ready to finish that, finish the binding. So this is how our hot pad looks right now. When I do binding, one thing I want to help you with, if binding is an area you struggle in, wonder clips are your friends, especially, you know, if I try to use these pins right now, I'm going to bend them. I'm going to poke myself, and none of that's good. That's where I think either the mini wonder clips or the regular size wonder clips, whatever you like, work so well. We're going to stitch this from the top, and I do want to do some of that stitching with you. I want you to see this finished product. So one thing people like to do, I've seen this, is some people like to actually press that binding out to the outside and just help define that edge even more succinctly. So again, if that's you, that's the right time to press. So to get a nice miter, I like to actually do this from the back of the project, and that's where the clear side will be up toward you now. Is go ahead and clip. Let me grab a bunch of those out. Clip all the way down. And as far as the miters, I find it's easier, and some people again like to actually press that corner. I don't necessarily do that, but if you want to do that, deal with one side and then lay the other side down, and then I clip that corner. That's going to give you a really nice miter from the front side. I've seen people try to fold them into each other, and I think it ends up creating a little bit of almost a collision and a bump there. So, you know, everyone's kind of has their favorite binding technique, but for me, this is the one that I have found works best. So again, if you're kind of fishing for some ideas, this is one that might work well for you as well. So let me go ahead and clip that corner. And again, see how nice that's going to come out. Over top of our, where your hanger is, if you've chosen to add the hanger, just know there's a lot of bulk right there. You might even want to put on maybe a walking foot if you have that. I should have, you know, mentioned that. That is now going across a lot of fabric. Some people even choose to use a chrome size 100 needle, kind of a denim jeans needle. So just something to think about, things I want to throw out to you. So I'll keep clipping, and then let's go over to that machine. And again, this is where you want to start thinking about thread. I would, if I had just a whole wall of thread to choose from, I would probably be choosing something a little bit lighter blue. I tend to match my thread when I'm stitching in the ditch to whatever this is. Now this is darker than I would pick. That just means I need to be really precise and really slow and really pull this back and try to sink that stitch right inside that corner. So let me go ahead and get one more side clipped, and I'll be right over at that sewing machine, and let's finish up our project. Okay, so when I stitch in the ditch, I just am trying to be very intentional about getting that thread right in that valley. And you just, so that it just kind of hides it for you. It's slow. So then when it relaxes, that's hidden. So just like that, we have this adorable, right? This is super cute and practical. So I know this has been a longer video, but how fun to be able to learn how to make these hot pads. They're super practical to use, and how great to give as a gift. And remember, These can create a quilt block. They don't always have to create a hot pad, and I love that option. So be sure to pick up your stencil, maybe your Prairie Pointer, and any tools that you might need to make these in a variety of sizes, again, for yourself or to give as a gift. Thanks again for giving me a part of your day, and I'll see you soon on another Shabby video.